Quigley in 5, underwater in the yellow lane.
Jess Carling of Great Britain.
Quigley goes through.
The silver to Jess Carling. Wonderful silver medal for Great Britain.
Welcome to the Honest Athletes podcast with
Lauren Quigley
and Jazz Carlin. Welcome back to the Honest Athletes podcast, and we are coming to the end of season 2 with just one more episode to come next week, so look out for that. But thanks for all that have listened, shared and supported us. We really want to be able to help and support as many athletes as we can throughout this podcast, and in our lives really we want to be able to help as much as we can. So this week I'm very excited to share with you this week's guest. It's often that we can find it quite difficult to talk about our own well-being and how to look after ourselves, but I just think it's such an important subject and something we can all learn about, and I can't wait to share with you. So this week our guest is leading the research around athlete well-being. So welcome to the podcast, Katie, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honour to be asked to come and talk about my research and talk to you guys about well-being and hear some of your experiences.
Katie, thanks for coming on. My first question, I think when people say well-being, they're like, yeah, make sure your well-being's good, you know, that's about it. That's all that's said about it. But could you just please, first of all, explain what is well-being?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. It's one of those things that I probably spent sort of the first year of my research looking at, okay, so what do we mean when we talk about well-being? It's one of those words that we all use and we all think we know what it means. And then when we actually take a step back and think about, okay, well, actually, no, what do I mean by well-being? So what we found really is that well-being, we can think of it generally as feeling good and functioning well. So having all of those sort of positive experiences and feeling joy and happiness and those positive emotions, and then functioning well. So not just turning up to, say, the pool and just getting on with your sets, but actually getting in the pool and feeling like you can function really well and you can do what you set out to do really well. Probably as well, it's quite complicated because well-being is really individual. So what I found through my research is that it's very related to sort of meaning and value. So those things that are important to you, those are the things that might affect your well-being, and those are the things that you judge your well-being on. So for example, if, say, your close relationships, maybe they're really important to you, and so your well-being would be related to them, whereas some other people maybe aren't so social and they maybe place a bit more importance on other things such as performing well or perhaps, doing well in exams, things like that. So it depends on what do you find important in your life and how is that going, I guess, would be then how your well-being is affected or not.
And I know, Katie, we've worked together with Swim Wales and we've done some fantastic work with some of the athletes in Wales about this. And often I say to them that it's kind of like free gains by actually being able to work on yourself. It's not like you need to work any harder or you need to train any faster. It's actually by actually looking after yourself, it can actually have such a huge impact on your performance, both in training and outside of training at competitions, and an all-round person. So how would you, I guess, describe athletes' well-being and how best to kind of manage yourself around training and competitions?
Yeah, so what you said is really important. It's something that you can do, and you can get lots and lots of benefits from working on your well-being. So often when we think about well-being, we normally think about, okay, poor well-being or negative well-being or the context of sort of mental illness. But actually by looking after your own well-being, there's lots and lots of benefits that you can get, such as sort of you're less likely to get ill, you're a lot healthier physically. So your heart, you'll have better quality sleep, better quality relationships, and all of those things then will lead into performance. So I guess if you asked sort of how best can you look after your well-being, probably the first thing I would say is just get to know yourself, get to know who are you, what's important to you, what do you value, what do you enjoy, what things don't you enjoy, and then what are those signs that your well-being might not be so great, or the signs that your well-being is great. So think back on times when you felt really good and you functioned well, and then go, okay, so what was happening? What were those signs that I was like doing well, I guess. Maybe you were more chatty or less chatty. And then same for maybe negative well-being. So have a little bit of a think back to maybe some times when you haven't felt so well, and think about how you knew that you weren't feeling so well. And often that's easier to do when you reflect. When you're in the moment, it's really hard to think, okay, like, what is my well-being like? But looking back, it's a bit easier. And sorry, I don't know if that helped.
Yeah, no, it definitely all helps. And it's, again, as Jazz said, something that's really important. In terms of, so you've just mentioned like reflect on your well-being. That's a great thing to do. But again, going back to what I said earlier in terms of well-being seems like such a large term for something that's so important. And just to learn again a bit about what well-being is, it sounds like it's a mental, but is it also physical? Can it be like how's your physical well-being, your mental well-being? And then how do you reflect on that? Because people that are listening now, athletes and stuff, is my well-being good? Well, how would I know? Is it like, am I happy or am I sad? Or is that something completely separate? I'm sorry, I'm making it like a 50 question thing, but I've just got so many things going on in my head right now.
Yeah, no, again, it's one of those terms, it's really, really complex. So there's lots of different types of well-being. So you mentioned sort of physical well-being. That's another type of well-being that's sort of specific to your health. I guess what I tend to think about when I talk about well-being is that mental well-being, not the physical well-being as much, but they're really linked. So you can't really separate the mental from the physical. And you probably know this when you're perhaps maybe feeling a little bit ill or not at your best. Mentally, you might not be feeling at your best. And the same when you're having a bit of a bad day mentally, often that can come through with physical symptoms. So you might have a headache or you might have some tension and you get those physical symptoms. In terms of the signs, I guess, of how can you recognize well-being or how can you reflect on your well-being, there's some common sort of indicators that your well-being might be good or might be poor. So get to know where is your baseline, what do you normally like, how do you usually feel? So people tend to, you have people that you probably know who are very happy people generally, and they're up here, and then there's other people who sort of are maybe a little bit further down on the scale. And then sort of getting to know when your well-being is changing is, okay, so when does that change? So when do you start maybe not feeling so great, or you might notice changes in your ability to focus or your ability to rationalize situations. Or a big one is like changes in your behavior, so changes in social interactions. So a lot of the time when people's well-being maybe is declining, they will withdraw from those social interactions. Again, it's really, really individual. So then there are some people who maybe when their well-being is declining actually chat more, and they seem to go like really, really chatty. And maybe that's because they don't want to sort of think about the things that are going on in their head. So in terms of when you ask how do you know if your well-being is high or low, it's only by really getting to know yourself and getting to know your own indicators. And how you can do that is, I guess, like I said, on reflecting, and that might be sitting down and just thinking about your past experiences, or it might be talking to people around you. So maybe going up to your coach or your parents or your friends and saying, how do you know if I'm having a good or a bad day? How do you know how I am? And then they'll say, oh yeah, I know when you're having a good day or a bad day. I know, Jazz, you've mentioned sort of your coach would say to you, yeah, I knew you were having a bad day when you walked in. So yeah, just talk to people, I guess, reflect. And that might be reflecting just by thinking on things. It might be writing things down, perhaps record yourself talking about experiences that you've had and listen back to that.
It is funny because obviously, as you say, getting to know yourself. And I think it's only now that I've stepped away from competitive sport that I've actually truly appreciated and trying to understand, I guess, those signs when my well-being maybe isn't so great. I don't tend to sleep so well when I feel like my well-being's kind of declining. I find it very hard to make decisions, to get organised, whereas I like being quite organised. And like even today, I've struggled with a few different bits, and it's like it feels like one thing after the other. And I came on here quite flapping a little bit because I'd had a few things that I hadn't been able to do, and my camera died of battery. And it felt like a lot of things were going wrong. And I really want myself and Lauren to try and share our experiences, because I think for me within sport, it wasn't necessarily something that was spoken about. I do think we are becoming more confident speaking about it. We are finding it okay now to try and open up a bit more. But I remember, and we've spoken about it on the podcast previously, that years ago it would be trying to put on a brave face and thinking that everything's fine. And I've noticed a few times throughout my swimming career, from missing out on the London 2012 Olympics, where it was a very difficult time. And I guess that was probably quite an obvious time because I had a huge disappointment and trying to manage myself back, which did take some time. But a lot of people don't know is the struggle that I actually had after the Rio Olympics, which I haven't necessarily spoken about. And that was after coming back from the Olympics. I'd achieved my dreams. I'd come back with 2 medals, come back from an Olympics, and I guess on top of the world, that feeling, thinking I'd achieved everything. But I came back and it kind of felt like, was that it? Was that the Olympics that I built up in my head since I was a young girl to go on to the Olympics? But also coming home and going back to some kind of normal when I'd been in this bubble of the Olympics, the village, the athletes, the excitement, everyone talking about the Olympics, then come home. And when you start to come back to reality, and I actually wish that I'd done some more reflecting after coming back from the Olympics to manage myself back to training. Because when I look back, and it's only now when I reflect, and I actually pulled out of the World Championships in 2017, and that was because my well-being was declining, and I didn't feel in a good enough place to be training, to be competing against the best in the world. And if I'd have actually reflected and given myself some time, some space, and recognized some of those signs that we talk about when your well-being does come down, that it could have changed, and I could have been, I guess, coming back and actually understanding why I had certain thoughts. And I remember coming back to the house, and I had people over at the house, and I went up to my bedroom and I just wanted to be in darkness and just hid under my bed, and I didn't want to speak to anyone. And obviously that was quite a low moment, but I think being able to reflect and recognize those moments, those feelings, emotions, but also when things are starting to I guess take a bit of a downturn where you're not at your best. I didn't feel like I was at my best, and I do feel like that affects relationships, friendships, and all the kind of things that come with life. Lauren, do you have anything from your point of view, I guess, from being able to recognize, talking about it now, those signs when things do start to decline a little bit and you don't quite feel yourself?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we've spoken on the podcast before about our downtimes, and before we came on, you know, Jazz, you made a great point, and I'm sure you've probably listened to Katie say something similar, that we always focus on our downtimes, but in terms of well-being, there are up times as well. For me in my career, I don't even think I used the word well-being once. You know, Jazz has spoken to me about working with Katie, for those listeners that are listening, and has only spoken about great things. And I've thought, oh, this is amazing that Swim Wales are actually talking about well-being, because like I said, I don't even think I heard it once. And so when Jazz said, I'd love to get Katie on, what do you think? We'll do a episode on well-being. I thought, fantastic, because it'd be great to talk about. It needs to be talked about. I was like, right, okay, what's well-being? Well, it's being well. What does that mean? And that's why my questions at the start were like, what is well-being? So like you said, I've only really thought about it from coming out of swimming, from stepping outside of swimming. And so for me, when I look back, yeah, there were times when I declined quite quickly, actually. It was like I came back from the World Championships in Kazan, where I swam amazing, and it was like the perfect layup for the next year. And then everything just declined from different situations at home. But I've never, to be completely honest, I've never thought about my well-being during swimming. Yeah, we talk about psychology and this and that and the other, and I'm sure all of these terms come under the well-being topic, but I've never actually thought about it. And my question to Katie, we had the number one squash player in the world, Laura Mazzaro, on for the last episode, and she was known in squash as the Ice Queen. But if you knew Laura really well, you knew that she was the complete opposite. She was this lovely, person that gets all these normal emotions from sport, nerves, worries, doubts come in, as well as the positive side. And so as athletes, we are actors, really. We're poker face, that didn't hurt, but inside it's like, well, it did hurt big time. And so how, maybe for parents or coaches listening, or for yourself even, how do you work with athletes, get to know them so well? And then what do you do about it if you notice signs that maybe someone's well-being is declining?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting you saying about sort of the Ice Queen and playing the role of an actor when you're in your sport. And I guess oftentimes if I was speaking to an athlete who said that to me, I would want to talk to them a little bit about why are they keeping sport so separate from who they are in other areas of their life. And because I think, as I said before, I'm not from a sporting background. So I think probably coming into sport for me, it was really shocking to see how separate people keep sport from the rest of their life, when really well-being can't be sort of separated into, okay, I feel great in sport, but not so great in life, or I'm feeling not so great in life and suddenly I'm going to be fine in my sport. So there's got to be that some sort of link between your sport and your outside life. And there are going to be times when you probably need to manage that so you're able to perform, so in competitions and things. But in terms of, I guess, there's a bit less of a focus now from switching off and leaving every single thing at the door, and more to being like, okay, I've got this going on in my outside life, and being open and honest and communicate with all the people around you. And one of the things that does then is it really helps you get the support that you need, because if you are, maybe there's stuff going on at home and you're going into the pool and you're not speaking to your coach and they don't know there's stuff going on at home, and you're just trying to sort of perform and not think about it. And then maybe perhaps that's not really working and you're not enjoying it. Whereas if you can say to your coach or to your parents or to your friends, something's going on at home, or something, maybe school's not going so well, or I'm not doing as well in this area of my life, and really talk about that with people and be open and honest, you're going to be able to get that support that you need, rather than just sort of boxing yourself in and saying, okay, I walked through the door and now I'm a swimmer and I'm nothing else. And what we found actually was that often when athletes do have sort of negative effects on their well-being, it's because they have perhaps a really, really strong athletic identity and they don't see themselves as anything else other than a swimmer. And I'm not sure if maybe that's something that you, Jazz, or Lauren really can sort of resonate with. Like, did you feel like you were Lauren the swimmer or Jazz the swimmer, or did you feel like you maybe were Lauren the person or Jazz the person?
Yeah, no, can definitely identify that. I was Lauren the swimmer. I loved it. I was not interested in school, so I think that made me even more, that's you, that's what you do. And even though I had great family around me who were like, you're Lauren and you do, swimming is something you do, I was just like, no, I'm a swimmer. That's what separates me from everyone at school. And so when that's taken away, of course, I know lots of my teammates or just ex-swimmers or ex-athletes in general who are like, oh, wait a second, I'm nothing now. Or, what am I really? So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that link between that persona of outside of the pool or outside of the arena or whatever sport you do, and then the one that's in the arena or in the pool. That's really interesting. Jazz, what about you?
Yeah, it's a funny one, and we've spoken about it quite a lot, about having our identity and finding passions, I guess, away from training and swimming. And it's something that I've actually found quite hard, because I felt at times that it's given me so much focus and I've been so driven towards achieving and wanting a certain goal. But in the meantime, when things necessarily aren't going well, you don't have a good session. I found that it just took its toll on me, you know, everything just became more intense, and I'd beat myself up really about not having a good training session, because it felt like it was everything, you know, it felt like it was your absolute life. And I guess even to an extent, even now, I guess it kind of happens, you know, when people talk to me, it's, do they want to know who I am or what I'm interested in away from swimming? Or do they just really want to know about the Olympics, what it was like to race against all these amazing people? And that can sometimes feel quite difficult, I guess, is when people do just want to talk about swimming. And I guess that's why we did the podcast, is to be able to share and to be able to open up. And we're not just the swimmer, the person, it's being able to find out all those different things about us. But Katie, I guess, how important is that identity away from sport, and I guess finding those passions and things that you actually really enjoy? How much can that, I guess, impact your overall well-being?
Yeah, I think it plays a massive role in terms of well-being. I mean, there's so many benefits to sort of finding out who you are outside of your sport, even just from the transferable skills. So say, for example, there's a lot of swimmers I know who are quite into Xbox and gaming and stuff like that. And those sort of reaction time skills that they bring from that hobby outside of sport into swimming. But I guess that's still very related to the sport. But probably the most beneficial side to having an identity outside of swimming is when perhaps your sport isn't going so well. So perhaps maybe you haven't performed as well as you'd hoped, or you haven't been selected for a squad, or you're not really enjoying swimming at that moment in time. And then if you don't have anything else outside of swimming, that's difficult, because you don't have anywhere else to place your focus or to distract you. Or one of the main things as well is that it gives you a sense of perspective. So you realize that actually there's more to who you are than just being a swimmer or an athlete. There's all these other areas and all these other things that you're good at. So then that helps mentally, because you're not sort of putting all your eggs in one basket, I guess.
I would love to just go back to something that Jazz said earlier, because I feel like I glossed over it because Jazz sort of went, what about you? And I was like, actually, we should talk about what Jazz has just talked about, which was post-competition blues. We all talked about it after major competitions, and even though I know all about it, hearing Jazz say that she came back from the Olympics, she got her silver medals, and she still felt the way she did, even though I know all about post-competition blues, it's still like, gosh, how can you feel that way? Or, you know, it's sad, you know, in a way. And so what do you think Jazz could have done, or could have been doing maybe, and planned for after the Olympics? I don't know. What would you suggest if you could have spoken to Jazz straight after the Olympics, or if you knew she was going through that?
Yeah, I think probably my one top tip for that would be to sort of use the social support around you, have those open and honest conversations. Don't be afraid to tell people how you're feeling. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jazz, but probably you were feeling like you couldn't maybe tell people because you've just had this amazing experience, and now why are you feeling so down, and how do you communicate that to someone? But when you do have those open and honest conversations, and you do communicate exactly how you feel, what you'll find is not only there's more people around to support you, but there's more people who have had the same experience. So if you don't talk about it, you're not going to hear all of those experiences. And I guess that's sort of the great thing about you guys having the podcast and talking about all these different experiences and all these different topics. At least there's somewhere people can go. And I don't know, would it have helped, do you think, if you'd have heard some experiences from people around you who'd been through similar?
Yeah, I definitely think being able to talk, I've never been the best at talking, and it's something that I hold my hands up. I wish I do, because when you look back at situations, you're like, why didn't I reach out or be able to speak to people earlier? But I guess you feel, I don't know, shame, as you said. I did feel a bit of guilt, a bit of embarrassment, that why would someone that's just come back and achieved her dreams feel down, and she doesn't seem herself. And that can be quite tough. And I know, Katie, we talk a lot about emotions, and we're very good at labeling them. Oh, that's a great emotion because I was so happy, or stress, or when we talk about, I don't know, being upset or things like that, and we label, I guess, guilt, bad, these kind of emotions, but that is just how we feel. So I guess, could you just talk to us a bit about like your emotions and how, I guess, we do all have various different emotions, and on some days I'm a lot more sensitive than others, but could you just talk to us a bit about emotions?
Yeah, I think we just automatically tend to label emotions, I guess, as good or bad. So good emotions, we see happiness, pride, joy, all of those sorts of things. And what we really mean when we say good is the ones that we like experiencing. And then when we talk about the bad emotions, they're the ones that we don't like experiencing. So the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment, the sadness. But really, there isn't such a thing as good or bad emotions. So there's just emotions. And as human beings, we all should experience a whole range of emotions. For example, there are times when being angry is actually a good emotion. So if you see somebody hurting somebody else, then you're going to be right to feel angry about that. That's going to be a beneficial emotion. So really getting to sort of understand what emotions are telling you and how they might be helpful, and not labeling them as good or bad, I guess. We often just try and eliminate the bad emotions, but that is what makes us human, is experiencing that contrast between the good and the bad emotions as we label them.
I always see having emotions as a really good thing, good or bad, because Jazz and I have both spoken about feeling numb at times in sport, and that's obviously something that's not good, because if you get out of a race and you haven't qualified, or you haven't done a great race or whatever, and you don't feel angry or disappointed, you just feel numb, then obviously that's a massive indicator that you're in a pretty bad place. But I'm really glad that you've said that about emotions, because like you say, people just say good or bad, and that's not necessarily the case at all.
Yeah, so as we said about emotions, often we can do, and especially around intense environment, whether that's exams, whether that's coming up to a competition, and we can feel quite emotional. What strategies can you do to, I guess, manage your emotions, to manage those quite intense and sometimes quite high pressure environments?
Yeah, so I guess like sometimes we have emotions, and like I said, they're not good or they're not bad, but they can be a bit intense, and they're not helpful in certain situations. So I guess, yeah, if you're standing on the blocks about to jump into the pool for a competition, you probably don't want to have massive levels of anxiety. You want that to be at a manageable level. Or if you're about to go and sit in an exam, you need to be able to focus. So there are times, I guess, when you need to be able to manage those emotions and bring them down to a level that you can still function with. So there's loads and loads of different strategies. There's sort of some strategies you can do perhaps when you're in the moment. So if you're actually there and that the emotion needs managing right that second, then simple things like breathing. So focusing on, maybe imagine a circle in front of you getting bigger when you're breathing in, and then getting smaller when you're breathing out, and imagine that circle just expanding and contracting, and breathe with it. And then what that does is that tells your body that there's no threat, basically. So it calms down sort of your heart rate and your blood pressure and all of those physical symptoms, that then tells your brain, okay, everything is all right. And that emotion then will be easier to manage. Another really easy one to do is just, you can use the alphabet and just think, okay, I'm going to name animals using every letter of the alphabet. So A for aardvark, B for bat, C for cat. And then what that does is that takes your attention away from all of those thoughts that are going around that are causing you anxiety or whatever the emotion is that you're feeling, and just bring you back to a place where you feel like you can function. if there's situations where you know that you're going to get intense emotions, then there's stuff that you can do beforehand. So there's like an activity where you can write down sort of all of the things that you are worried about, or all of the things that might happen. So say for a race, you might write down everything that might happen, even as outlandish as it might be. So I might put someone else's swimming costume on, or something, like all of the things that might go wrong or might happen, write them down. And then in the next column, right, okay, so what can I do about that? And then the things that you can do stuff about. So I don't know, forgetting something. Okay, you can pack maybe the night before, or you can prepare yourself. And then the things that you can't really do anything about, they're the things that you've put them down, and you need to like leave them there on that piece of paper, and then just getting them all out sort of helps you to manage those thoughts and be able to sort of do the things, control the things that you can control. And then hopefully that's going to bring the emotions down. You're not going to experience such intense emotions in that situation.
An animal beginning with X.
I'm going to be lying in bed tonight. I'm going to be going through trying to think of all these animals or things for the alphabet.
An animal beginning with X.
I don't know one. I don't know why I said animals.
But you've said it now, so now I'm just...
Names is quite a good one too.
Names.
What is? Names. Well, I'm glad that we did the strategies, because I think that can help lots of people, not just athletes as well. Do you work with coaches or parents, or is it just athletes at the minute?
Yeah, so we've done some parent and coach workshops. Probably not as many as I'd like. It's been mostly focused on athletes. But yeah, definitely would be keen, especially to do a lot more parent workshops and involve the parents a lot more, because I think they're a massive part of the swimming journey, and they often get overlooked in terms of how can they best support their child, and also look after their own well-being. It's very tough for a parent to they sacrifice a lot to be able to put their child through swimming. I'm sure, I think you talked about it with your parents, both of you, and they need that support as well, and they need to know how to look after their child's well-being and their own well-being.
Before we came on to the podcast, we had a quick chat, and you said, and I know you've already said it on the podcast as well, that you haven't come from a sporting background. And so there's some things that you've learned that you've been quite shocked at. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, because I'd love to know what some of these things are, if you're okay to share them. Yeah,
of course. So I don't think I really realised how young swimmers sort of specialise in swimming, and how much I knew they swam twice a day. I knew it was quite a lot of work, but I didn't really understand how much work. So sort of some people are training 2 hours in the morning and then going to school, and then training 2 hours in the evening, sort of most days of the week, and then on a Saturday. And it's easy to say, oh, have hobbies. I know we talked about having hobbies outside of sport, and it's probably easy to say have hobbies outside of sport, but how do you do that really when you've putting in so much time and so much effort? So I think I was shocked at that. I was also shocked at just how performance focused sport is. And I don't know if I should have been shocked about that, but it is very much focused on, okay, let's get faster, let's beat this time. And that's changing slightly now too. Let's make sure athletes are feeling good as well as performing. But I don't think I was quite prepared for those two things mainly.
Yeah, and I think even now, as people are starting to take note about their well-being, people do seem to be staying in the sport longer. I remember from a young age, there was a lot of kids that dropped out, and it kind of felt like I was one of the last ones standing from like some of my ages when I was racing. And I guess the more we look after our athletes in whatever sport, and the more we can, I guess, manage well-being, be able to look after ourselves, the longer and the happier and the better environment. And I guess how important is that environment, that the people around you, of the things you're doing, have an impact on your well-being?
Yeah, absolutely massive. So the people who are around you really can influence your well-being. They can support your well-being, and they can recognize when your well-being is fluctuating, and Probably one of the most interesting findings of my research that I found is that swimmers would tell me things like, oh, the coach recognizes it before I recognize myself, when they were talking about their well-being declining. Or they would say, oh yeah, my parents, they know exactly how I'm feeling before I even know. So really having an environment that prioritizes and supports well-being and knows what it is and how to do that right is really important in terms of, I think there's also been a bit of a narrative of performance or well-being historically in sport, but actually it's not, there's not a separation, I guess I'm trying to say, between performance and well-being. It's not like you focus on one or the other. You can focus on both. And actually by creating environments that are well-being focused, where not only focused on maybe the athlete's well-being, but the people in that environment, such as the coaches and the support staff, if they're looking after their own well-being and they're being the best person they can be, they're feeling good and they're functioning well, they're going to perform better at their job. They're going to coach better. They're going to parent better if they're parents. And that's all going to lead to that performance gains, I guess, without really focusing on performance.
I completely agree with what you're saying on, if everybody is happy in their role and doing the best they can, then everyone's going to get the best out of every situation they're in. So that's amazing to be talking about. I don't know how wide you've worked within swimming so far. So I don't know if you've been working right through all the ages or clubs and national centres and stuff like that. But I would love for you to talk about that more, because I was wondering, have you noticed, or has there been a notable difference in terms of the support for well-being the younger age against, the performance athletes, or is it similar all the way through? Is there more? What more can we do about it? All those sorts of things.
Yeah, so I think in terms of, there's varied support, and that's probably related to funding. So obviously athletes who've got funding, it's a lot easier to provide them with that psychology, the one-to-one psychology support that maybe they need. But there's a lot of great work going on. So as Jazz mentioned, myself and Jazz have been running some workshops, and that's for the younger swimmers. So I think there's definitely been a shift, and now there's a focus on, okay, so let's look after well-being right from the very beginning and all the way through, rather than let's only really look after the well-being of those people who are performing and winning medals. So yeah, there's definitely a shift, and there's a lot more focus on well-being within the swimming settings that I've worked at in.
Yeah, it'd be great. And I think the more we talk, the more it's spoken about. I think that's just going to help everyone. And as you said, there are a lot of tools. I follow a lot of people, and I think even from like social media, there are so much pressures both in sport and social media in life for all the kids growing up. But I think finding people that you do follow or that you do listen to, having things like this podcast that people can actually relate to and can actually think, oh, is this actually helping me and bringing kind of happiness and joy to my life? But I guess, what is the strategies for helping with well-being? We've spoken about speaking to people, how important that is. And that's something that I've always found difficult. But, when I look back and I think, oh, I actually felt like a weight had been lifted once I'd actually spoken about it. But what are the strategies for dealing with well-being to help yourself, I guess, be performing and at your best daily?
Again, I know I sort of already said this at the beginning, but probably the best thing you can do for yourself to be able to support your well-being is get to know yourself. Get to know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, trial and error. So finding those things that bring you joy. There's no point going and taking a nice, long, relaxing bubble bath if you don't like bubble baths. That's probably not going to help your well-being. But maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's some breathing exercises. But try out lots of different things. Find what works to you. Talk to people. Find out what works for them. Maybe they can have some suggestions and you can take that on board. And I know I sound a bit like a stuck record, but yeah, just really get to know yourself, get to know what works for you.
That's taken me back to when we did one presentation, Katie, and we had to draw ourselves and all the different things that made us us and what we enjoyed. I mean, I wish I had it. It was a terrible drawing. But actually getting to know what do I like doing? What do I enjoy? And I think it's only over doing these kind of presentations that I've actually been able to write it down. And I think it's actually amazing when you start writing things down, it actually makes you think, oh yeah, I do actually love doing that. And it's only recently I've started doing a bit of drawing because I found that I've actually really enjoyed that. So I guess it's finding those little things that you enjoy and that makes you, because everyone is so individual and so unique as well. Lauren, anything from you?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a personal question to both of you, really. How is your well-being?
You go first, Jazz.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something I try and manage as best as I can. And I've actually been working with a company called Teacup, and I think that's actually been the best reflection and awareness tool that I could have actually ever used. And I think sometimes, I can get a bit groggy in the day, or I can feel a bit down or whatever. And it's only then I've looked back, Teacup, you have to measure your hydration, how well you slept, and how stressed are you today? How well did you eat? And you actually look back and you think, oh, well, I actually haven't slept well for the past few days. It's been quite warm, I've not slept well. I maybe not drank enough water and it's been quite hot. And I guess being able to identify, and you actually think, oh, well, there actually is a reason why I'm not feeling maybe at my best today, because it has been really hot outside. It's been hard to sleep. I know I function so much better when I sleep well. So I guess now I do really appreciate and value the power of well-being and how important it is to look after yourself. But also, I guess, identifying the areas things that are important to me, the things that I love doing, and the things that make me happy. And at times I'm guilty of, I guess, suppressing or neglecting some things, going out for a walk or going to the gym, things that actually make me happy. And then it's only when you actually reflect and look back and you think, well, why have I not been doing the things I love, which are actually when I'm functioning so well? So Katie, what about you?
Yeah, I think actually I'm doing pretty well. I think my well-being is fluctuating quite a lot at the moment. So I'm coming to the final stages of my PhD. So there's a lot of sort of things going on. And I guess, as you said, Jazz, it's one of those things, like the things that you do to look after yourself and your well-being are normally the first things you get rid of. When life is getting tough, you go, I haven't got time to go for a walk, or I haven't got time to sit and read a book, or maybe do some drawing. But those are the times when you really need to be prioritizing those tasks. So over the weekend, I've actually prioritized sort of going for a run, doing some exercise, and I'm feeling a lot better now. So again, yeah, by getting to know the things that work for me, recognizing when my well-being is maybe fluctuating, and understanding that well-being does fluctuate. So like you said, Jazz, you were looking on your app and you were like, okay, yeah, well, I didn't get such a good sleep last night, so that's why I'm not feeling so great today. Or perhaps I didn't eat so well yesterday, so that explains why I'm not feeling so great. And we're not trying to get to a level where we're all just having great well-being days every day. There is going to be that fluctuation between the good and the bad days, but I guess it's recognizing when maybe the bad days are starting to roll into, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 or longer than that, when you need to really step in and just do something to support yourself.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're both in a good place. And Katie, good luck with everything that you're doing.
How are you, Lauren?
Me, yeah, I'm good. My well-being depends on how United play, how England play now in the Euros. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm good. I'm in a good place. Yeah, getting to work with athletes and stuff like that. It's definitely something that I need to focus on more, probably. And I think because coming from sport and being that athlete, and as all athletes know, and people that are involved in sport, we push ourselves a lot more than we probably should sometimes. So, I didn't sleep well last night. That just gets thrown out the window because I've got to do a threshold session. So it doesn't matter. You get in and you do the set and you work really hard and, you give it your all. And sometimes that's obviously a bad thing. A lot of the time you have to just do that as an athlete as well. We can't always go, I didn't sleep well, so I'm going to sort of go and read a book instead. But we must, and we are learning more, and it's thanks to people like you, Katie, that we're learning more now that that's more important than ever. And actually, really simple, but a happy swimmer is a fast swimmer. I always used to get told that, and yeah, it's very simple, but it's true. And so well-being, obviously that big umbrella, it's like if you can look after your well-being, then your performances are going to come as well. Your training, your consistency within everything is going to be positive. Anyone that's listening, whether you're a parent, coach, athlete, nothing to do with sport, whoever's listening now, yes, you who's listening now, please just take a moment to think. I don't want this to be an episode that just gets listened to and then lost. This is a really important episode, and we're lucky to have Katie on to talk about this. And just think about how your well-being is at the minute. Is it in a good place or not? And if it's not, do something about it. And if it is, great, carry on doing what you're doing. It's been absolutely amazing to have you on. I'm really glad. And now I know that what well-being is, and it is being well, but there's a lot more to it as well. And there's a lot we can do about it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to chat to you all about well-being, and I hope it's been helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Katie and Lauren, both for sharing your tips, for your stories. I think it's definitely a really important subject and something that we should talk about more and be able to become more aware of our own self and I guess what makes us us, which is really important. And thanks again for listening, whatever platform you're listening on. I know we've got a range of platforms now, so thanks for listening and for supporting us. We've got one last episode of season 2 next week, so make sure you tune into that one. And I think just finishing off on that podcast, I always like to say, just say to yourself 2 things that you're very grateful for today. That always seems to kind of bring me back and think how lucky we are. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, a like, or give us a comment and share if you've given it a listen. We really appreciate all the support, and we'll see you next week.